Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth. I will only
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 63, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is late Friday night, July 28th, and I'm in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. My tools, my people, I hope that you have had a wonderful week and you are doing well. I'm doing well. It's good to be back in the shed with you again this week. We're trying to get back in the swing of things. Trying to be a little bit more consistent in getting out here and putting out some content, covering some news, getting out there to you in only the way that we can from a shed in my backyard. No show last week. Last weekend I was traveling. The family and I went to Tupelo, Mississippi for a family reunion. That's right, a family reunion. Your boy is getting to the age now where all of my first cousins and I are grown, and we have families, and we have children. And what that means is that cousins and their children and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody aren't able to get together as often as we would like. So my sister and my cousin Kaylin put together our very first family reunion. And it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun. Had a good time. We drove 6 hours over there to Mississippi. Family came from Alabama, from North Carolina, from Kentucky. Everybody had a 6 or 7 hour drive. And then we had some family that was already there in Mississippi. And there was 31 of us in total. 13 kids. The oldest of whom was 12, with my 7-year-old daughter being the second oldest of the group. So there were babies everywhere. Little doppelgangers. The ones that look like what we used to. And we swam in the pool. We ate some really good food. My family, my wife and my kids and I stayed with Meemaw. You know Meemaw. Meemaw, we made it? Yeah. She's America's Meemaw now. She's international. We got like a few thousand people in India who are fans of Meemaw. So my family stayed with Meemaw and Pawpaw at their house, and that was really nice to get to spend some time with them and catch up. Meemaw said she's a few episodes behind on the podcast. So, she listens to every episode. She's like the only person probably in the world that has done so, and she was a good host. It was a good family reunion. It made me a little bit more grateful than I already am for the family that I have. We missed my cousin Ryan, my big cousin Ryan, the oldest of all of the cousins. He was the only one unable to make it. He just started a new job, moved to a new city, and he was the only one that wasn't able to be there, but we miss him. He listens to the show sometimes, so if he hears this, we missed you, big dog. We missed you. But it was good. It made me thankful for family. Thankful that I had the opportunity for all of us to get together. And we're looking forward to doing it again. Family reunions can be a lot of fun. And ours certainly was. The theme was Christmas in July. And it was Christmas themed. And it was a lot of fun. Really cool experience for me to see my kids playing with my cousin's kids, have my kids around all my aunts and uncles, around my grandparents, their great-grandparents, and you just can't take family for granted, and I certainly don't. What else? Oh, yeah, I read an article today that has me thinking about changing my name. The show might not be called In the Shed with Wes Anderson very much longer, my people, my tools, my babies. The show might have a new name. It might be called In the Shed with Subway Anderson. And I'm laughing because it's a ridiculous proposition, I know. But I read an article today that if you are willing to legally change your first name to Subway, you will get free sandwiches for life. And I gotta be honest, I'm considering it, okay? I'm considering. I'm from a small town in Alabama. We don't have a whole lot of fast food options right here in our town, but Subway is one of them. And my family frequents Subway fairly often, okay? Free Subway sandwiches for life, and all I have to do is legally change my first name. I would still be an Anderson. It wouldn't affect my children. It just would have a different name on my passport, a different name on my driver's license, and possibly on the podcast. I'm considering changing my name to Subway Anderson. Y'all can still call me Wes if you want to, but I'm just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, pretty soon this might be In the Shed with Subway. And they don't even have to sponsor the show, okay? If they give me free subs for the rest of my life, I'm a young man. I have a family to feed. Probably not the healthiest choice, but hey, it's food, all right? It's food. All right, enough of that. Let's get to some comments and corrections from our last episode. On our last episode, I could not pronounce for the life of me the word Gibraltar. The Strait of Gibraltar. And I'm pretty sure I'm saying it correctly now. I looked it up. I'm pretty sure it's Gibraltar. But hey, words are hard, okay? On our last episode, I mistakenly said that Bob Huggins had made racially charged remarks on a local radio appearance. His comments were not racial at all, but they were offensive to the LGBTQIA+ community. On episode 62, I mistakenly referred to Christian Brown as Christian Braun once before catching myself. But who can blame me? The man's last name is spelled Braun. And that's Braun. That's Braun. But he chooses to pronounce it Brown. And I made a mistake. I also left out that Bol previously played for the Denver Nuggets. And in coverage on the Centralia, Pennsylvania fire, I absolutely butchered the pronunciation of the Susquehanna Valley. Somehow, an area in which my brother-in-law Matthew went to college. Shout out, Matthew. Our humble little show is being listened to across the globe, 68 countries in total and counting. We are, of course, being listened to all over this great country of ours, all 50 states. But we also continue to be incredibly popular in India, which is slipping a little bit. India, you are down to just 42% of our listening audience. That's the lowest you've been in months, India. Ramesh, where are you? India, what has happened? Have I somehow offended you? Am I no longer covering the news stories that you need? Were you not captivated by the poop pill story on episode 62 of the show? Where are you, India? For some reason, we are absolutely on fire this month in both Canada and the UK. And I also want to give a special shout out to our 8 new listeners in Ethiopia this week. Salam, Ethiopia. We're currently averaging more listeners per episode than ever before, still true thanks to you, and we're still adding followers on Twitter or X or whatever it is now, You can find us there at In the Shed 4. You can support the show by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you leave us a review this week, we'll give you a shout out on our next episode, and we would greatly appreciate it. We've got a great show for you tonight, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Tyler, Texas. You just can't make this stuff up. Our first email comes from Tyler, Texas. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've ever had this experience on our show. In 63 episodes, 2 years, we've never had someone named after the town that they're from. But our first email comes from Tyler, Texas, and that's just delightful. And Tyler says, Wes, have you seen Sound of Freedom? No, Tyler, I haven't seen that movie yet. I imagine I probably will. Although maybe not in theaters. Several people have told me I need to go watch in the theaters. When I go to the movies, child trafficking is not what I want to watch while munching on some popcorn and sipping on a big gulp. Okay. It's an important topic. It's a movie that I will check out. It's a movie that I think has been unfairly polarizing for some reason in our culture today. And I'll probably get around to watching it. And when I do, I may even share some thoughts about it on the show. I know that's a significant issue and topic that needs to be highlighted, and that movie attempts to do it. Whether you're a fan of the movie or not, I think that's a worthy goal. But I'll probably wait till I can rent it on my TV and watch it with my wife and do so in the privacy of my own home. But thank you for writing into the show, Tyler, from Tyler. Thank you for listening. Our next email comes from Samantha from Rockford, Illinois, who says, Wes, just started listening to your show. At first, I thought it was so weird that you read the entire news story word for word. Now, I realize that because you do so, I'm getting the full story in context instead of a sentence or two that has been cherry-picked to fit a narrative. And hey, Samantha, congratulations, you have figured out the show. You are one of the sharpest tools in the shed, okay? Look, I've gotten several emails since we started doing this show like, hey, why don't you just talk about the news? Why do you insist on reading the entire article? And Samantha has figured it out. The reason that I do so is because most news shows, most cable news shows, and even a lot of podcasts, they'll give you a headline. They'll give you a sentence or two from the article, and they will cherry pick it, and they'll force it to fit whatever narrative they're trying to give you. And that's not what we do here. That's not what we do in my backyard at midnight on a Friday, okay? We give it to you straight. We keep it a buck with you. We keep it 100. We just read the entire article. I offer some thoughts, but I let you decide. I let you make sense of it for yourself because I believe that you are smart enough to do so. We're not pushing any type of narrative. We're just bringing you the news in a way that is a little bit different, okay? Thank you for understanding, Samantha. I'm glad you no longer think I'm that weird. And I'm thankful for you listening to the show. Thanks for writing in. And by the way, one more thing, Samantha. Let's call this a PS. PS, Samantha. A lot of news shows cover 4 stories during their entire show. And we give you 11. Every time we have an episode, we give you about 11 different news stories. And hey, we might cover poop pills, okay? But we're bringing you the news that a lot of people aren't. And we're bringing you news from the world of politics, from the world of sports, from the world of the paranormal, all in one show. So we are different. We don't fit the formula. We are an outlier. And we are a little bit weird. But that's okay too. And finally, Ramon from Washington, D.C. writes, Wes, what do you make of the blowback about Jason Aldean's new song, Try That in a Small Town? I don't really care, Ramon. I don't really care. It's just another example, in my estimation, of manufactured outrage. Our culture, our society, the news cycle wants to keep you in an outrage loop. They want you to be angry about what the song says, and then they want the other side to be angry because that's not what the song says. They want to pit one side versus the other. They want to draw a line in the sand between one group of Americans and another. And I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not going to take that bait. That's a song put out there by a country music artist that sounds like a song that would be put out by a country music artist. I'm neither a fan or a detractor of it. I don't listen to country music. I've told you guys I'm hip-hop, like some classic rock, some reggae, some contemporary music, but I don't really listen to country music. The one exception being my guy Colter Wall, if you consider him to be country music. He's kind of folksy, kind of bluegrass, kind of a storyteller, old school country music. He's phenomenal. Jason Aldean, I couldn't tell you a single song of his other than this one because it's been in the news. My thoughts about it are that I don't care. It doesn't move the needle. I don't find it to be important. But I am thankful that you listened to the show, and I am thankful that you took the time to write in and ask the question, Ramon. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. New report casts doubt on the old underfunded school trope, writes the American Conservative. Biden White House pressured Facebook to censor lab leak posts, reports Reason magazine. New Trump indictment says he ordered Mar-a-Lago camera footage deleted, says the Wall Street Journal. From NBC News, Ron DeSantis suggests that he would pardon Trump on any federal charges. And finally, other countries know housing is a human right. Why doesn't America? And that is according to The Nation. Our first story in the world of politics: Las Vegas police investigating Tupac Shakur's 1996 murder have searched a Nevada home. Las Vegas police executed a search warrant related to the fatal drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur, the latest turn in decades of investigations into the rapper's mythic and unsolved death. Shakur was one of the most popular artists in the world at the time of his death at age 25. His legacy only grew after he was shot while driving on the Las Vegas Strip in September 1996, and has served as the subject of dozens of books, films, podcasts, documentaries, and television shows. On Monday, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department searched a home in the suburb of Henderson, Nevada, about 15 miles from where the shooting occurred. The department has not publicly released any additional details or a copy of the warrant that was served, and declined NPR's request for comment on the investigation. But the news of the search has already added a fresh layer to years of speculation about the rapper's death, igniting new questions about what the case means and what a resolution may look like. Shakur was shot on the night of September 7, 1996, while driving home from a boxing match at the MGM Grand Hotel. Before leaving the hotel, Shakur was seen fighting with Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, who'd had a previous run-in with a member of Shakur's entourage. Shakur then departed the hotel as a passenger of a black BMW driven by Marion Suge Knight, who was the head of Death Row Records at the time. While stopped at a red light, a white Cadillac pulled up next to the vehicle and opened fire, shooting Shakur several times. The rapper died from his injuries 6 days later. After 3 decades and multiple investigations, no one has been arrested or charged in connection to the shooting. Shakur's family filed a civil wrongful death suit against Anderson, who was also named by police as a suspect in the case. Anderson was killed in a gang-related shooting in 1998. During Monday's search, police emerged from patrol cars with their guns drawn, yelling for occupants to leave the house with their hands above their heads, according to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which cited a neighbor. Residents in Henderson tell the Associated Press they saw officers detain 2 people as investigators searched the home. There were cruisers and SWAT vehicles. They had lights shining on the house, Don Sansucci, a resident in the neighborhood, told the AP. Sansucci said that he had just gone to bed with his wife when a slew of police lights woke them up shortly after 9 p.m. local time. According to the AP, public records linked the home search to the wife of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the uncle of Orlando Anderson, one of the rapper's known rivals. Authorities have long suspected Anderson in Shakur's death, the AP reported. Anderson, who died in 1998 in an unrelated shooting, denied any involvement in Shakur's death at the time. The news of the search was a surprise to those tracking the investigations, such as Santi Elijah Hawley, who authored the book An American Family, The Shakurs and the Nation They Created. In an interview with NPR, Hawley said the police didn't seem to take the initial investigation seriously, even when witnesses revealed through the media that they witnessed the shooting. Las Vegas police have said that the investigation was delayed because witnesses refused to cooperate. I think the police quietly had a vendetta against him throughout his life, throughout his career. Shakur baked criticism of law enforcement into his lyrics and spoke out against police harassment and brutality in interviews. In 1991, he sued the Oakland Police Department for slamming him to the ground after he was caught jaywalking. In 1993, he was charged with aggravated assault for shooting 2 off-duty police officers, but the charges were later dropped. So, Tupac Shakur was murdered in 1996 at age 25. I was 6 years old at the time, but I vaguely remembered the story being in the news. And being that Tupac is one of my 2 or 3 favorite artists of any genre of all time, I certainly have followed the case, read a lot about it, all the conspiracy theories surrounding it, as a teenager, as a young adult, and as a grown adult. And it's just very interesting to me that after all these years, all of a sudden they would execute a search warrant. I saw this article pop up and I was like, man, I've got to talk about this on the show just because this is something that interests me. This is something that I care about. Tupac's music, his lyricism, his poetry, his activism are all things that have impacted my thinking and my worldview. I have his book of poetry that was published after he passed away, The Rose That Grew from Concrete, on my desk at work. And honestly, I thought it was one of those things that we just would never know what happened. That there would never be an arrest made. Because the gentleman quoted in the article is exactly right. When Tupac Shakur got murdered in the middle of Las Vegas, it seemed like the police just didn't really have much interest in solving this particular crime. And to say that Tupac and the police had a strained relationship would be an understatement, okay? Tupac is seen as one of the forefathers of gangster rap. He had the slogan, Thug Life, had it tattooed across his stomach. But Tupac Shakur was no thug. He was involved with Suge Knight and Death Row Records, and certainly there were gang ties there. But Tupac was a theater kid. He went to a performing arts school in Baltimore. He was an extremely talented poet, musician, and actor. He was a sensitive guy, raised by a single mom. And even that motto, Thug Life, doesn't mean what it sounds like. It was more Tupac trying to take ownership over something that young black men were often referred to and called, and repurposing it, and rebranding it. There are countless theories about what happened to Tupac, conspiracies that he faked his own death, that somehow Suge Knight was actually involved because he was not shot, just grazed by a bullet. And a lot of people think that Orlando Anderson, no relation, was the culprit all along. Because Orlando Anderson was a part of a rival gang to some that were connected to Death Row. And he had had a confrontation with some of Tupac's guys, had snatched a chain, emasculated the guy in public. So after the Mike Tyson boxing match in the hotel, they see Orlando Anderson in the lobby, and Tupac and Suge Knight and the whole group just absolutely pummeled the kid. They rushed him. It's all on video. Tupac kicks him in the head. They push him to the ground. They beat him. And a few hours later, at a red light, Tupac is talking to some girls in the car next to him, and a white vehicle pulls up and opens fire, and he's wounded fatally and passes away 6 days later in the hospital. Apparently, the house that search warrants were executed on belonged to the wife of Orlando Anderson's uncle, who has said on podcasts since Orlando Anderson has died that he knows who did it, that he was in the car when it happened, although he didn't have anything to do with the murder. And now a search warrant has been executed on his house. They took iPhones and iPads, hard drives, journals, and a host of other things. And look, if this ends up leading to this case being solved once and for all, then it'll be a wonderful thing. For fans of Tupac, for family, for friends that are still alive, it'll provide at least some semblance of closure. In my estimation, Tupac is the greatest rapper of all time. You can make arguments for others, certainly, but the legacy that he left, the way that he impacted the rap game and still does to this day, in my estimation, is unmatched. And I think it's unfortunate that because of his run-ins with the law and public perception about him, that his death was not taken as seriously as it should have been. Leads were not properly chased down at the time, and the trail was allowed to go cold. I always had questions about the ties to Orlando Anderson. On the one hand, it makes sense that if Tupac and his group had just beaten this guy, that he would seek revenge. If there's gang affiliation on both sides between rival gangs, it would make sense that he would be involved in Tupac's murder. But I was never quite sold on that reality. Maybe evidence will turn up once and for all that in fact was true, and that this is a case of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation is in fact the one that is most likely to be true. I hope they get to the bottom of it. I hope they figure it out, but the fact that there is at least movement in this case after so many years, I thought was newsworthy, and I wanted to talk about it on the show. What do you think happened to Tupac? Who do you think is responsible for his murder? Was it Orlando Anderson? Was it Suge Knight? Was it somebody else? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear what you think about it. But we're certainly going to keep an ear to the ground, keep eyes on this story, and report back as it develops further. Our next story in the world of politics: IRS whistleblowers lash out at federal officials in fiery Hunter Biden hearings. 5 takeaways. 2 whistleblowers provided Congress with their side of the story from the years-long investigation into Hunter Biden, who has become a lightning rod for Republican allegations about a 2-tiered justice system in the United States. Speaking to leaders of 3 powerful House committees who led a joint hearing Wednesday, Internal Revenue Service employees Greg Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, who was previously known as Whistleblower X, alleged that U.S. Justice Department officials slow-walked the investigation into President Joe Biden's youngest son. It appeared to me, based on what I experienced, that the U.S. Attorney in Delaware in our investigation was constantly hamstrung, limited and marginalized by Justice Department officials as well as other U.S. attorneys, Ziegler said. This marks the first public testimony from the 2 IRS agents who were assigned to the case, which focused on tax and gun charges against Hunter Biden, who ultimately agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of tax evasion and participate in a pretrial program in June. Republican officials and other conservative activists have swarmed Hunter Biden for years, blasting the plea deal as a slap on the wrist and a sign of preferential treatment that an average American couldn't get. Shapley said the investigation's treatment was different from any other case during his 14-year stint with the agency. At every stage, decisions were made that benefited the subject of the investigation, he said. The Justice Department has denied both Ziegler and Shapley's claims. Here are key moments from Wednesday's hearing. Agent X has been revealed, and he's a Democrat. Ziegler, a 13-year IRS veteran, was the main IRS case agent on the case and supervised by Shapley. He had been anonymous until Wednesday's hearing. During his opening statement, Ziegler emphasized that he's a gay man and a registered Democrat who has been accused of betraying his party. He compared testifying to the day he came out as a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. I am an example of other LGBTQ people out here who are questioning doing the right thing at the potential cost to themselves and others, he said. We should always do the right thing no matter how painful the process might be. whistleblowers target Hunter Biden's tax delinquency. Ziegler alleged David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, who was appointed by former President Donald Trump, previously agreed certain felony charges against Hunter Biden were warranted. But he said other Justice Department officials believe no jury would convict him given his drug addiction and the death of his brother Beau Biden. Hunter Biden improperly claimed business deductions for a range of personal expenses, Ziegler said, from his children's college tuition to stays for his drug dealer at a Hollywood hotel. In written testimony, he said he was denied a request to interview Hunter Biden's adult children, alleging prosecutors said that would get us into hot water. I do not want my colleagues at the IRS, FBI, and other federal law enforcement agencies to go through my frustrating journey, Ziegler said. Don't ask the big guy or dad. Here's what the IRS agents allege happened. Joe Biden has long denied speaking with Hunter Biden about his business dealings, and he expressed personal support for his son after Hunter Biden's plea was announced. Throughout the hearing, Ziegler and Shapley drilled into how they felt Hunter Biden was receiving special treatment and that they were discouraged from pursuing the case to its fullest extent. During his opening statement, Shapley said aspects of the investigation were delayed until after the 2020 election and then never pursued because of the political optics, including any examination of Joe Biden's role, if there was one. Prosecutors instructed investigators not to ask about the big guy or dad when conducting interviews, he said. Shapley also alleged Weiss wanted to bring the tax fraud charges against Hunter Biden in jurisdictions outside of Delaware, including the District of Columbia and California, but was denied. Weiss and federal investigators have denied those claims, saying he never wanted to bring charges in other states or cities. The GOP asks, who are you going to believe? Republican lawmakers who launched the investigation days after Hunter Biden's plea deal went public said the two IRS agents are credible and that their claims should be taken seriously. The White House and Democrats would have Americans believe that our investigation is based on 5 years of conspiracy theories, said Rep. James Comer of Kentucky, chairman of the oversight panel. But we have facts and new evidence that continues to be uncovered by our committee, revealing the First Family's corruption, he added. Other GOP lawmakers pointed out contradictions in Weiss's letter to House committees and how the whistleblower's testimony underscores an anxiety that the Justice Department and other federal agencies allow politics to tip the scales of justice. The question is, who are you going to believe? Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio said. The Democrats say Hunter Biden lost his way, but there's no evidence of interference. Throughout the hearing, Democratic lawmakers looked to poke holes in the two agents' testimony and the GOP's assertion about the investigation. Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland pointed out how Joe Biden never replaced Weiss, a Trump appointee, and he stayed out of the investigation into his son. Now, can you imagine Donald Trump saying nothing about a witch hunt or not trying to quash the prosecution if it were his son being prosecuted, he said? Other Democratic lawmakers grilled the two IRS agents and pointed out how claims of delays during the investigation happened before Biden was president. Raskin, the ranking Democrat on the oversight panel, added that no concrete evidence was presented that Hunter Biden was given preferential treatment and that the two whistleblowers are simply expressing their disagreement with the decision to accept a plea. We'll hear about how they disagreed on investigative steps and what criminal charges to bring on normal stuff in government investigations that doesn't usually lead to a congressional hearing, he said. But one thing you will not hear today is any evidence of wrongdoing by President Joe Biden or his administration. So, one thing that has been consistent in the entirety of the existence of this show is that we always get pushback from listeners who are Republican or Democrat, claiming that we bash the president. When Donald Trump was president, we heard this. Now that Joe Biden is president, we hear this. I get emails to the show, why are you not covering the indictments of former President Donald Trump? I've gotten several emails to the show, why are you not covering the Hunter Biden issues and the discrepancies in testimony given, the IRS whistleblower accounts? And my answer to both has been the same. I'm waiting to see what developments actually occur in both stories. Because unlike Fox News, unlike CNN, unlike MSNBC, what I'm not going to do on this show is make claims of fact about something that I know very little about. And we're in such a toxic and hyper-partisan political atmosphere that all you're seeing are team politics. The truth is secondary, maybe even third. What matters most to mainstream media, to Democrats, to Republicans is what can we get the other team for? How can we make the other side look bad? And I simply won't participate in it, okay? I've told you I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. This show is not a conservative news show. It's not a liberal news show. It's a tongue-in-cheek news show recorded in a backyard shed. Okay. Who I'm for is the American people. What I'm concerned with is the truth. What I'm after is justice and fairness. And when there are developments in the story of Donald Trump and his indictment, when push comes to shove, when all the facts come to bear, when something actually happens, hey, we'll cover it. And we'll hold the man to account. By the same token, when things happen in the Hunter Biden story and facts are laid bare, when there are developments, hey, we'll cover it. And as much as it impacts the President of the United States, we'll hold him to account. That's how we do it on this show. And in this story, there have been some developments in the last week or two. These two IRS whistleblowers have come forward. They've made their identity public. They've made some very serious claims about the investigation into Hunter Biden and how it's been slow-rolled by the Justice Department and how they've been unable to fully investigate any ties to the President of the United States and the rest of his family. And look, the allegations here are serious. I know Democrats will say, well, Hunter Biden is not the president. We've heard this. This is another example of Hillary's emails, the same thing over and over and over. But it's really not. It's really not. Because what we do know, according to IRS report, is that Hunter Biden received somewhere in the neighborhood of $17 to $30 million from foreign business interests that are connected to foreign governments for jobs that he was unqualified for and may or may not have actually done any work at all in. And that on that $17 to $30 million, he wrote off a lot of fraudulent tax breaks, didn't register as a foreign agent, and didn't pay taxes on that revenue at all to the tune of, I think, $1.2 or $1.7 million. Go ahead and fact check me. And then as a felon, he had a handgun. He fraudulently purchased a handgun. So when Republicans come forward and say this doesn't seem to meet the standard that someone who has done these things would normally be prosecuted by, that the plea bargain seems like a slap on the wrist, we have to at least consider the facts. If the things that the IRS whistleblowers are claiming are true, it's a scandal. And it's a big one. Because it means that the Justice Department has not allowed a complete and fair and full review of the facts. And that should never be the case. Just a couple days ago, the plea bargain that Hunter Biden agreed to fell apart in court. And it doesn't appear that it was a result of a judge who is unfair. The judge in this case is someone that was appointed by Donald Trump, but who is well respected and liked by Delaware Democrats as well. And essentially when the plea bargain came before the court, she asked the prosecutors, does this mean that Hunter Biden has complete immunity going forward to any crime? And they said, well, no. It means that he has immunity to the things that we've agreed to, that we will put him in a diversion program. He won't face jail for the tax issues and the gun charge. But we still have the right to prosecute on other things, aka failing to register as a foreign agent in the future. To which Hunter Biden's representatives and attorneys go, wait a minute, that is not how we understood this deal. We thought that he had complete immunity for any charge going forward. And the deal was quashed. And it fell apart. And what that may mean, and I say may because we still don't know, despite what Fox News or Sean Hannity tell you, we still don't know. But what it may mean is there's still an investigation going on into Hunter Biden's foreign business deals. And that they may have the ability, if not the desire, to charge him for not registering as a foreign agent in the future. And look, Paul Manafort, who was connected to the Trump campaign, failed to register as a foreign agent and went to prison for like a year and a half or 2 years. Okay, it happens. It happens. Joe Biden, for his part, has continued to deny any involvement in his son's business practices. There are at least a couple of former business partners with Hunter Biden that claim that Hunter Biden put Joe Biden on the phone with foreign business partners on at least a dozen occasions. It's certainly odd that Hunter Biden was allowed to pay off his tax debt in order to make this plea bargain by getting a loan. It didn't come from his personal bank account, but he paid it back from a loan that came from a famed Joe Biden Democratic donor. There's certainly some odd things to do with this case. Some things that make you go, Some things that are a little shady at least, that don't seem to make a lot of sense. And look, it happens on both sides. Let's be fair. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump were given like $1 billion, maybe $2 billion, I don't recall, but they were given a huge sum of money by the Saudis. And anytime this happens, you have to track the money. Where is it coming from and why? What is it exchanged for? And if Hunter Biden was using his last name and the fact that his father was the vice president of the nation at the time to peddle influence in exchange for money that he dispersed among family members, that is a big deal. And it should be investigated thoroughly. But to me, the main point here, and the thing that sticks out to me the most, is the situation in which we find ourselves in our country, where we have so devolved into team politics that all the R's and the D's are interested in doing at this point is investigating the other side. Indicting Donald Trump for anything they can, the Republicans for finding dirt on the Bidens. Both sides claim the others are guilty, are dirty, are corrupt, and hey, they might both be. They might both be. And at least as of right now, we still have a long time to go before elections, but as of right now, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are by far the leaders in the clubhouse for the nominations of their party. And we're stuck. We're stuck with the possible reality where we have to choose one of these two people to be the leader of the free world once again. And it highlights to me the brokenness of our two-party system. That we have to pick one of these two very, very old people with questionable business ties and ethics, who seem to be about themselves and their families ahead of the job and the nation, who have those connected to them who use their last name and their position of power to gain influence and to enrich themselves. And hey, none of it should be legal. None of it should be happening, but this is where we find ourselves, and we need to find a way out. We need to find a way back. A way back to some semblance of civil servanthood, some way to get away from career politicians who hold office only so they can enrich themselves, because it's gross. And I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I'm not here to defend Joe Biden. I'm here to hold both to account. And the actions of both and their families are certainly questionable. And in this instance, if it turns out to be true what these IRS whistleblowers who at least come across as credible are saying, then Joe Biden's going to have some problems moving forward. This is going to be an issue for Democrats in this next election. If they don't find a way to reach that plea bargain again and anew, Hunter Biden may be in some trouble, because he certainly at least failed to register as a foreign agent and took a whole lot of money that he did not pay taxes on. And look, I just got to say, if you or I failed to pay that much in our taxes, I don't think that we would get a plea bargain. I don't think that we would get a loan. I don't think that we would have a donor to help us pay it off. It's all political. As Eminem said, it's all political. And it's unfortunate. And it's sad. And it's not the America that I want or that you deserve. And that's real. Our next story in the world of politics, Pentagon's Ukraine accounting error revised up to $6.2 billion. The Pentagon found it had overestimated the amount of funding for ammunition, missiles, and other equipment it sent to Ukraine by $6.2 billion due to an accounting error. A spokesman said on Tuesday more than double the amount previously disclosed to the American public. The value of the accounting error was revised up from $3 billion that was first reported by Reuters in May, the result of assigning a higher than warranted value on U.S. weaponry shipped to Ukraine. Additional funding was uncovered as Pentagon officials researched the situation more thoroughly and clarified protocols for valuing equipment based on financial management regulation and Department of Defense policy, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said. The $6.2 billion breaks down to $3.6 billion for fiscal year 2023 and $2.6 billion for fiscal year 2022, she said, adding that the errors did not impact the size of presidential drawdown authority or support of Ukraine. Yeah, your government, the Department of Defense, accidentally sent Ukraine and Zelensky $6.2 billion with a B, more dollars than they meant to. And this is a big deal. $6.2 billion. We've already sent so many resources and so much weaponry and ammunition and money to Ukraine. And look, I'm not a fan of Vladimir Putin. I'm not a Putin apologist. I think that you should ridicule the man for his last name, okay? Give him that middle school treatment. Hey, you got a funny last name, Putin. Just mock the man. Make fun of him relentlessly in the public square. That's what I would do if I were a world leader. But our response is to send Zelensky $6.2 billion more than we agreed upon on accident. And that is quite the rounding error. Quite the financial mistake. My personal budget would be shot if I accidentally added a zero to any of my bills. But the DOD is out here just sending $6.2 billion extra dollars over to a foreign country. On accident. Allegedly. And I just wonder, I can't help but wonder what could be solved in our nation if $6.2 billion were earmarked for the betterment of the American people. We got trains that are flying off the rails, flights that are canceled or delayed at a record volume, inflation through the roof, the epidemic of homelessness, healthcare crisis, a housing bubble that's about to pop, and an education system that has fallen way behind other world leaders. But we're out here accidentally sending an extra $6.2 billion across the world to keep a war going that doesn't benefit anybody. I don't think that Putin should have invaded. I don't think that we should just stand by and let him do whatever he wants. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that at some point you have to draw a line somewhere. Aren't you tired of us being the world's police? Aren't you tired of us investing all of our resources across the world for military interests that don't involve us? I'm not saying we shouldn't support Ukraine. I'm not saying that we should just roll over and let Putin have his way. But I also don't want to invest in another Afghanistan. I also don't want to send ammunition and money and resources somewhere across the world just to ensure that more people are going to die. And that the military-industrial complex continues to benefit from the war machine and all the things that go into it. There's absolutely no recourse. There's no accountability. There's no penalty for the DOD making a $6.2 billion mistake. They just say, hey, we figured out we made a mistake. Our bad. $6.2 billion to Ukraine. Kind of makes me wonder if it even was a mistake. Kind of makes me wonder what else is really going on behind the scenes. And I don't tend to be a conspiratorial person, okay? But it does make me wonder. And as we reported on the show before, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, has never passed an audit. In its history, it's failed every audit it's ever had. They just misplace billions of dollars with no recourse. And this should be a bigger deal. This should be an outrage for every elected official, for Congress. The president should care about this. This should be a leading story on all news outlets, and I heard it reported in passing once or twice, barely. I saw it buried on the third page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. $6.2 billion with a B. But we're going to cover it here on In the Shed with Wes Anderson. We're going to let you know what's really going on in your country. We're going to hold elected officials and branches of government and military to account, because the first step in making a change is knowing what's really happening. And even though it's hard to believe, this is something that is really happening. Our last story in the world of politics: the Chinese Communist Party is rewriting the Bible. And not in like a fun reboot kind of way either. In a very sinister way. But I digress. As part of a push to sinicize religion, the Chinese Communist Party has embarked on a 10-year project to rewrite the Bible and other religious texts. In the Gospel of John, Jesus famously confronts the accusers of a woman caught committing adultery, saying, "Let the one among you who is guiltless be the first to throw a stone at her." The chastened accusers slink away, and Jesus says to the woman, "Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she replied. "Neither do I condemn you," said Jesus. "Go away, and from this moment sin no more." A beautiful story of forgiveness and mercy. Unless you're a CCP official. Then it's a story of a dissident challenging the authority of the state. A possible sneak preview of what a Bible with socialist characteristics might look like appeared in a Chinese university textbook in 2020. The rewritten Gospel of John excerpt ends not with mercy, but with Jesus himself stoning the adulterous woman to death. And that's crazy. That's wild. I have to take a break during this article because that's insane. To rewrite the Gospel of John with Jesus actually casting the first stone. Hey, that's not who Jesus is, okay? I think maybe the CCP just does not know the Lord. I digress. Across Henan Province, local CCP officials forced Protestant churches to replace the Ten Commandments with Xi Jinping quotes. "Thou shalt have no other gods before me" became "resolutely guard against the infiltration of Western ideology." And those two things are not alike. One of these things is not like the other. "Thou shalt have no other gods before me" has become "resolutely guard against the infiltration of Western ideology." The 10-year project to rewrite the Bible, Quran, and other sacred texts is all a part of Xi Jinping's quest to make the faithful serve the party rather than God. At the 19th Party Congress, Chairman Xi declared, "We will insist on the Sinization of Chinese religions and provide active guidance for religion and socialism to coexist." Let me translate. Xi Jinping has no problem with the first commandment, just so long as he and the CCP are playing the role of God. You might expect the Vatican, the leaders of the largest Christian congregation in the world, to be incensed and defiant. Unfortunately, you'd be wrong. In a secret 2018 negotiation, the Vatican agreed to allow the CCP to select Catholic bishops in China, supposedly in exchange for vague reassurances of safety for some Catholic congregations, which were immediately aggregated. The CCP wants the authority to select the next Dalai Lama, a sacred tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhists are attempting to stand up to CCP coercion, but Beijing counters that even Pope Francis, leader of the mighty Catholic Church, accepts their authority over church leadership. Religion's power is tantalizing to the CCP. What better demonstration of party supremacy than bringing global religions to heel? The PRC Constitution states that citizens enjoy freedom of religious belief, but of course the CCP's definition of freedom bears a much closer resemblance to what we'd call oppression. The United Front Work Department manages religious affairs in China because religion is a tool to be coerced, co-opted, and corrupted to advance party goals, and once harnessed, control people's minds. Only 5 faiths are officially recognized. Less established faiths face even more intense persecution. The Falun Gong remains an unfamiliar spiritual practice to many outside China, but that does not make their suffering at the hands of the CCP any less real. The State Department estimated that at times, half of the population of China's re-education through labor camps or modern gulags were Falun Gong adherents, to which we have reported on the show before about the organ harvesting that takes place in these camps. And the adherents to the Falun Gong religion are a lot of the folks who are having their organs forcibly harvested. We're ahead of the curve, my babies. We covered the things on this show that don't get airtime a lot of other places. Thousands were tortured to death, and there have been widespread reports of an on-demand organ harvesting from Falun Gong prisoners, like I told you. But it's in Tibet and Xinjiang that we see the CCP's unsanitized, brutal attitude toward religion. While other faiths are persecuted throughout China, Buddhists and Muslims in the far west of the country are facing quite simply the attempted annihilation of their faith, and in some cases their population. The CCP is committing genocide, the crime above all crimes, in Xinjiang, while some of the world's religious leaders like Pope Francis barely murmur a word in opposition. To hear Hamut Isgil, a Uyghur poet, describe in The Atlantic how the PRC government had required all Uyghurs there to hand over any religious items they held, religious books, prayer rugs, prayer beads, articles of clothing. Some were unwilling to part with their Qurans, but with neighbors and even relatives betraying one another, those who kept them were quickly found out, detained, and harshly punished. One Uyghur woman related to Freedom House that now the rule is, if I go to your house, read some Quran, pray together, and the government finds out, you go to jail. Maya Wang, a researcher at Human Rights Watch, summed it up this way. The Chinese government's religious restrictions are now so stringent that it has effectively outlawed the practice of Islam. The CCP is also perpetrating a slow-motion cultural genocide across China's west and north, targeting the Muslim and Buddhist faiths and the identities of the Tibetans, Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, Southern Mongolians, and other ethno-religious minority groups. Buddhist statues are bulldozed, monasteries are gutted, mosques are destroyed. Children are forcibly separated from families and packed off to colonial boarding schools where religion and native languages are often forbidden. Yet even under intense persecution, faith persists throughout China, and the number of faithful grows. In my work in Congress, I've heard unthinkable stories of religious oppression, but I've also listened to accounts of underground churches, brave clergy, and steadfast believers every bit as courageous as saints of the early church. While Chairman Mao called religion poison, I've come to believe that the CCP's blood-stained record of religious persecution is actually just a battle within their broader ongoing war on the human spirit, on our very capacity to reach for something higher. The CCP wishes for there to be nothing higher than their authority and views love for anything beside their Marxist-Leninist regime with vicious jealousy. In an interview with The Guardian, the pastor of one Chinese church stated, "In this war in Xinjiang, in Shanghai, in Beijing, and Chengdu, the rulers have chosen an enemy that can never be imprisoned, the soul of man." The pastor ended with an assessment that we must make come true. The PRC rulers are doomed to lose. So, China is on a mission to rewrite the Bible and the Quran and other books of faith in an attempt to limit the religious freedom of their populace and exert their authority and control even when it comes to the very soul of man. Wow. If this is shocking or upsetting news to you, it may be that you're new to the show. It may be that you've not listened to very many episodes of In the Shed with Wes Anderson before. Because we've covered this in a way that probably few other news shows do. We've talked about the plight of Uyghur Muslims. We've talked about the persecution of the Falun Gong group and the organ harvesting and the Chinese concentration camps. We know that in China they don't have the freedoms that we do in America. We know that the church is persecuted there, that there is a state-sponsored quote-unquote church. But true adherents of the church have to meet underground and under threat of being persecuted, arrested, beaten, or even killed. And this is happening in 2023 in one of the biggest nations and most powerful nations in the world. And you rarely hear about it. You hear a lot about how China is one of the leading causes of pollution in the world. You hear about how they're a military threat to us. You hear about the trade wars with China. You hear about the theft of intellectual property, and all of those things are things that matter. But this is a human rights violation. And even if you're not a person of faith, a whole lot of you that listen to this podcast aren't. And that's okay. You're welcome here. You're always welcome in the shed. I happen to be a man of faith, and if you're not, that's okay. You're always welcome here, but even if you're not a person of faith, the fact that this is happening in China should bother you and should affect you. And it should be something that is concerning to our leaders and to our businesses that relocate factories to China and manufacturing to China, and our celebrities that get their checks from Chinese corporations, and from our governments that sell acres and acres of farmland in our country to Chinese corporations. News like this should matter. They're literally trying to rewrite the Bible, to change the character of Jesus from someone who is full of mercy and grace and forgiveness to someone that upholds the harsh reality of the state. If you're a religious person, there's a word for it. It's called blasphemy. And if you're not a religious person, there's a word for it. It's called human rights violations. And it's sickening, and it's wrong, and it should be alarming to you. As an American, it should be alarming to you. As a human being, as someone made in the image of God, it should be alarming to you. If you're a praying person, pray for the people of China. If you're not, send good vibes their way. And if you ever have the opportunity to interface with elected officials, with those who have power and influence in our nation, those who are CEOs of businesses, those who have fame and wealth, maybe try somehow to get this on their radar and to awaken them to the fact that this is happening in 2023, not 1800, not 1940, but 2023. This is happening today on a level and at a scale that most people do not realize, and it isn't right. I don't want to go to war with China. I don't want to go to war with anybody, but I don't want to go to war with China. But stuff like this is alarming, and it's a threat to freedom, and it's a trampling over the rights that every person is entitled to. And if you don't know, now you know. That's all the news in the world of politics. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. NBA sends memo addressing Lillard trade request. Joe Burrow out several weeks with calf strain. Sean Payton regrets harsh critique of Nathaniel Hackett. Big 12 looks to add another team and get to 14 in total. Dalvin Cook high on possibility of joining Jets. Bronny James discharged from hospital and is resting. Ex-Vols coach Jeremy Pruitt to teach and coach high school basketball in Alabama. Five-star linebacker DeMarcus Riddick chooses Auburn over Georgia and Alabama. And finally, Zion Williamson and family are being sued by a tech company over a loan. And we're going to give out our In the Shed with Wes Anderson NBA and NFL draft grades. But first, this story from college sports, and that's that Colorado is leaving the Pac-12 and headed back to where they came from, the Big 12. You may have seen that Deion Sanders, coach of Colorado, who has provided a complete overhaul to their roster, famously arrived at Colorado coming from Jackson State and told his players on day one, hit that portal. I'm bringing my own luggage and it is Louis. And so they've had a mass exodus on their roster like has never been seen before in college football. Deion Sanders has had some health complications and was unable to be there for Pac-12 media days. He was dissed by several other coaches, including Brent Venables from Oklahoma, who claims that the way that Deion Sanders has handled things at Colorado was not good for the sport. And now Colorado is heading back to where they came, the Big 12. And look, I got to say that my initial response is good for Colorado. Good for Colorado. Make no bones about it, I root for the Buffaloes. My number one team is the Auburn Tigers. We just got a 5-star linebacker, DeMarcus Riddick, who actually comes from my alma mater, Chilton County High School in Clanton, Alabama. Yeah. He is the highest rated athlete to ever come from our high school, and he chose Auburn over Georgia and Alabama. So Nick Saban, you put him in the front seat of your limo, it didn't do any good, okay? And I have no right to claim credit for him going to Auburn, but I will anyway because I am from Chilton County. I played basketball. I lettered 4 years at that school, and this man went to Auburn. So War Eagle to that. But Deion Sanders and crew are going back to the Big 12. And I think this is a smart move for Colorado. The Pac-12 is struggling. Next season, they lose USC and UCLA to the Big 10. They're struggling to find a media deal that all the other major conferences have no trouble finding. Their commissioner seems to be lost. They're not adding teams like the other conferences have. They haven't had much of a response to the conference expansion that we have seen happening over the last several years. So for Colorado to go back to the Big 12 makes a lot of sense. They're a better fit there. That's where their tradition is. That's where they came from. And I think with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC, that Colorado could even be competitive in year one under Deion Sanders next year. Now look, make no bones about it, Deion Sanders has upgraded the talent level on that roster immensely this year. You might not like the way that he's done it, and there's probably some fair criticism there as far as the way that he treated his student athletes. But he's definitely made that team a lot better this year than they were. Colorado has a proud tradition. It's a good academic school. They've been a good football program in the past, but they've been mediocre or worse for a decade. They won one game last year, okay. And look, he's increased the talent level, no doubt, but I don't expect them to win a whole lot of football games this year. They have a tough schedule. They've got to play Nebraska. They've got to play USC. They've got to play Utah. They've got to play UCLA. They have a schedule of teams that they aren't ready to compete with this season. But next year, when Deion Sanders has had a full year to recruit and to add to that roster, and they move to a Big 12 that does not feature Texas, that does not feature Oklahoma, hey, they might have something. And being in the Big 12, it's going to allow them to recruit in areas that maybe they don't have the ability to do so otherwise. And you might disagree with me, but I think it's a match made in heaven. Deion Sanders to Colorado, Colorado to the Big 12. It just seems to make sense. And the Pac-12 might be dead. Maybe that's a tad hyperbolic, but the Pac-12 might be dead. Who's going to be left? Utah? Oregon? Washington? And a whole bunch of other ands. I like it. I like the move. I like the fit. What do you think? Did Colorado make the right decision to go to the Big 12? Is this the end of the Pac-12? Are you pro Deion Sanders? Do you despise the man? Do you think he'll succeed at Colorado? How will they do this year? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear from you. Should I still be saying Twitter? Or should I say get at us on X? I don't know. Mine still has the Bird app. I'm going with Twitter. Let's move to the NBA, where the NBA draft has happened, and the top 10 looked like this. The first pick, of course, was Victor Wembanyama to the Spurs out of France. The second pick was Alabama shooting forward Brandon Miller, who went to the Hornets. With the third pick, the Blazers took point guard Scoot Henderson. The fourth pick was Amen Thompson to the Rockets. The fifth pick was Oscar Thompson to the Pistons. The sixth pick was Anthony Black, the shooting guard out of Arkansas, to the Magic. The seventh pick was shooting forward Bilal Koulibaly from France, and I don't know if I said that name right. I've never heard of this man. He's from France, but he went to the Pacers. The eighth pick was Jarris Walker, power forward out of Houston, to the Wizards. The ninth pick, the Jazz took power forward Taylor Hendricks from Central Florida. And the 10th pick was point guard Cason Wallace from my Kentucky Wildcats to the Mavericks. And here are our In the Shed with Wes Anderson draft class team rankings. And I gotta say, they're quite different than any other rankings that I've seen, okay? It might mean that our rankings are better and more accurate. It might mean that I am off my rocker. You tell me. You decide, my tools. The fifth best draft class in my estimation was that of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who just had one pick. But I still put them in my top 5. Because in the second round, they got shooting guard Amani Bates from Eastern Michigan. And I think this was a superb pick. I really do. Imani Bates was one of the best players in high school basketball. Was supposed to go to Memphis, ended up transferring, wound up at Eastern Michigan. Had a decent career there. Never was on the big stage in the tournament. We kind of forgot about him. And he got picked in the second round by the Cavs, and it appears in watching Summer League basketball, which I do because I can't help myself, the Cavaliers got a steal in the second round. They got a guy that could have been a top 15 pick, honestly. And they got him in the second round. So the Cavaliers draft class, even though it's just one person strong, I have as the 5th best draft class overall. Number 4, and I will get so much hate for this, I have the San Antonio Spurs. I do. I have the San Antonio Spurs. And look, I know they got Victor. I know they got Victor Wembanyama. Okay. And I know everybody is hailing him as the greatest prospect in the history of basketball. I've seen him play 5 games. And he's probably going to be a very good player. Probably. We don't really know yet. But probably. He'll be a wonderful player. But he's also just one pick. And then they got another guy, C.D. Sissoko, a shooting guard also from France. They're just picking everybody French. They just want you. Oui, they want you. Eiffel Tower, they want you. Hey. Some baguettes, they want you. All right. Croissant, they want you. Greg Popovich, like, give us all of the French guys. And they got 2 out of the 4 who were drafted. I have them at number 4. At number 3, I have the Charlotte Hornets, who got Brandon Miller from Alabama. But they also got Nick Smith Jr., a guard from Arkansas, who I really like, and they had a total of 6 picks. The Hornets have been stacking picks, okay? And they got 6 picks. They got Brandon Miller, who will be an impact player from day 1. They got Nick Smith Jr., who I think is underrated. And the totality of their picks put them ahead of the Spurs for me. Because even though Victor Wembanyama may be a player that transformed the Spurs franchise moving forward, the Hornets had an opportunity to do the same thing through sheer numbers. And they got their guy in Brandon Miller, but they also got some other players who can contribute as well. I have them number 3. And number 2, I have the Orlando Magic. And here is where I differ. Number 3, the Hornets. Number 2, the Magic. Not many people had that, but I have the Magic at number 2 with Anthony Black from Arkansas, Jet Howard from Michigan, and Andre Jackson Jr. from UConn. And look, they loaded up on shooting guards. They got 3 shooting guards from college basketball that are all impact players. I like the pick of Anthony Black. He has a chance to be very good. I think Jet Howard was a phenomenal pick from Michigan. And I even like Andre Jackson Jr. from UConn. They needed a shooting guard. They got 3 of them. And they're going to see who can play and who fits their system and who works out. I like what the Magic did. I have them in their draft class number 2 overall, which should tell you who my number 1 draft class is. And that's the Portland Trailblazers. Yeah, the Portland Trailblazers, who are still waiting to trade Damian Lillard. The NBA just sent out a memo to the entire league. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is tired of being seen as a softie. Dude sent out a memo to the entire league that said, hey, if you are a player who demands to be traded, and you make the claim, as Damian Lillard did, through his agent, that if you go to a place you don't want to play, that you will not fulfill your contract and you'll just sit out, you may be punished. Adam Silver is like the stepdad to David Stern's father figure. Because David Stern would flat out drop the hammer. Like, he'd take the belt off on you. And Adam Silver's like, hey, you might be punished. I'm going to give you a stern talking to. But look, I love what the Blazers did. They got Scoot Henderson number 3 overall. I think he's a better player than Brandon Miller. I think he makes a bigger impact right away. And then they picked Chris Murphy, the power forward out of Iowa, whose brother plays for the Sacramento Kings. And look, Chris Murphy had a very good senior year in college basketball. I think that he's going to be a player that will start for them before the season's over. I think that he's going to be a very good player. They also got a shooting guard out of France. I really love what the Blazers did. They're in a tough position. One of the best players in franchise history wants out. They're not going to get a return for him that matches his value to their team, okay. But they have some pieces. They have some players they can build around. They drafted Scoot Henderson and Chris Murray, who are wonderful picks and who will do a good job for them. And then also took a flyer on a shooting guard out of France. So those are my NBA draft class team rankings. I think the Blazers are number 1 overall. The Orlando Magic are number 2. I have the Hornets at 3, the San Antonio Spurs at 4, and the Cavaliers at 5. I would love to hear your feedback on my rankings. Am I correct in putting Portland number 1? How crazy am I for having the Spurs 4th? And how in the world could I include the Cavs when they only drafted 1 player? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? I would love to hear from you. Email the show at In the Shed with Wes Anderson. Get at us on Twitter at InTheShed4. I want to hear your top 5 rankings and where you have your favorite team falling in those rankings. Moving on to the NFL draft, the number 1 pick, of course, was Bryce Young, the quarterback from Alabama, who went to the Panthers. Quarterback C.J. Stroud from Ohio State went 2nd overall to the Texans. Will Anderson went 3rd to the Texans. Quarterback Anthony Richardson from Florida went 4th overall to the Colts. Devin Weatherspoon, a cornerback out of Illinois, went 5th overall to the Seahawks. With the 6th pick, the Cardinals picked Paris Johnson Jr., an offensive tackle from Ohio State. The 7th pick overall was Tyree Wilson, a defensive end from Texas Tech that went to the Raiders. The Falcons took Texas running back Bijan Robinson with the 8th pick. The 9th pick was Jalen Carter, a defensive tackle from Georgia, to the Eagles. And the 10th pick was Darnell Wright, an offensive tackle from Tennessee, who went to the Chicago Bears. And here's how I have my draft class team rankings for the NFL draft. And if my NBA rankings were a little bit askew and a little bit awry and a little different than the other rankings the other programs and sports talk shows put out, my NFL draft class team rankings are probably absurd. They're probably absurd. The teams that I have 1 and 2 overall are pretty much 1 and 2 in almost every ranking that I saw. But 3, 4, and 5 are barely top 10 to top 15 in most rankings, but hey, it's my shed. And this is how I see things. And I'm going to give it to you straight. Number 5 overall, I have the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, I have the Packers. And look, part of it is just the strength in numbers. The Packers had 13 draft picks in this year's draft. They added 13 players with the opportunity to make their roster and contribute. In the first round, they got Lucas Van Ness, a defensive end out of Iowa, who I really like. And after that, it was just a lot of quality. It was a lot of value on the dollar. In the 4th round, they got Colby Wooden, a defensive tackle from Auburn, who I think can play at the NFL level. The 5th round, they took a flyer on quarterback Sean Clifford from Penn State. In the 6th round, they took a kicker, Anders Carlson, from Auburn as well. And they got Carrington Valentine, a cornerback from UK. A lot of value in this draft for the Green Bay Packers. Not a lot of star power. Not a lot of guys that are first-round talents. But a lot of guys that can make a roster. A lot of guys who can contribute. 13 draft picks overall. I have the Packers being the 5th best draft class in this year's NFL draft. 4th overall, I have the Cleveland Browns. Yeah. I have the Cleveland Browns. In the 3rd round, they took wide receiver Cedric Tillman from Tennessee, who I think is a phenomenal talent. They also got an offensive tackle, Jones from Ohio State in the 4th round. And then they took the quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. And DTR is a prospect, no doubt. He's not somebody that's going to play right away, but he's someone that fits their system that could be a good second or third quarterback on their roster. They got a total of 7 draft picks, and kind of like the Packers, I think they picked a bunch of dudes who can make their roster, a bunch of dudes who can contribute, a bunch of dudes who at least tip the scales toward a winning football program. I have the Browns at 4th overall. At 3rd, I have the Detroit Lions, who took running back Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama in the 1st round. They also got Jack Campbell, an inside linebacker from Iowa. Sam Laporta, a very talented tight end from Iowa. And in the 2nd round, they got Brian Branch, a safety from Alabama. And then in the 3rd round, one of the steals of the draft, I thought, was quarterback Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. He's coming off of an injury, but he's not going to have to play right away in Detroit. He's going to be able to sit, going to be able to learn. I think he's an extremely talented player who had a phenomenal final season at Tennessee. If he had not been injured, he might have been in the Heisman conversation more. The Lions got 8 draft picks. They met their needs. They picked players for their future. I have their draft class ranked 3rd overall. 2nd overall, I have the Houston Texans. Yeah, I don't have them number 1 overall. I have them number 2. I really like what they did in the 1st round. They got C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson back-to-back. More than almost any roster in football, the Texans need upgrades at almost every position. And they did it on the offensive and defensive side of the ball right away in getting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. They got their quarterback. They got their anchor of the defense. But they weren't done there. They added some other players who were good. I really like the pick in the 4th round of Dylan Horton and Henry To'oTo'o, 2 other guys who can contribute to their defense, who can play right away. And they got a total of 9 players, an influx of 9 draft picks who are anchored by C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. I have the Texans as the 2nd best draft class in this year's NFL draft. And of course, that means that in my mind, the best draft class overall this year was the Philadelphia Eagles, the runner-up in the Super Bowl this last year, who just barely fell short to Patrick Mahomes and company. The Eagles had 2 first-round draft picks. They got Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle, and Nolan Smith, the linebacker, both from Georgia. Those guys are national champions. Those guys are both top 10, 12 talents in all of the draft. Nolan Smith, I was surprised how far back he went. Jalen Carter actually dropped because of some issues he had off the field. They also added offensive tackle Tyler Steen in the 3rd round. They had a total of 7 players. And the Eagles already have one of the best rosters in football from top to bottom. Offense, defense, and special teams, the Eagles have one of the best rosters in football, and they just got better. They just added more quality depth. They just added more guys who can play. More players from Georgia. They just going to draft everybody from Georgia. If you're from Georgia, you won the national title, hey, come play for the Eagles. And I got to say, it's probably a strategy that's not too bad. And I think they had the best draft class. So those are my draft class team rankings for the NFL draft this year. I think the Eagles did the best job overall, had the best draft class. Texans were 2nd. Detroit Lions were 3rd. The Cleveland Browns were 4th. And the Green Bay Packers round out the top 5. Where did I go wrong? How far off am I? Where do you look at those rankings and do you have a problem or do you want to bicker? What did I do that was smart? Email the show at intheshedwithwesanderson@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. That's all the news in the world of sports. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of the paranormal, where our first story takes us to the Amazon. Yeah, we go into the forest, my babies. Mom of children who survived 40 days in Amazon was alive for days after plane crash, father says. 4 children who survived 40 days in the Amazon jungle after a plane crash endured the death of their mother in front of them and used supplies from the wreckage to stay alive, authorities and a family member have said. More details have emerged about the incredible ordeal involving 4 children from the Makudi family who are part of the indigenous Huototo community. They were rescued on June 9th by a combined force of Colombian military personnel and indigenous searchers. The children, ranging in ages of 1 to 13, were able to stay alive in the Colombian jungle after all the adults aboard a Cessna plane they were riding in were killed in the May 1st crash. The oldest sibling said their mother initially survived the crash, but died 4 days later, the father of the 2 children told reporters. Before she died, their mom told them something like, "You guys get out of here," Manuel Renoco said. The oldest child, Leslie McCooty, 13, showed her resourcefulness in caring for her siblings, Solony, 9, Tien, 4, and Kristen, who turned 1, during their time in the jungle. Narcisco McCooty, the children's grandfather, told reporters the children initially stayed by the plane and survived on 3 pounds of cassava flour they were traveling with. When no one came to help, the siblings started walking. Leslie made sure to take camping gear, a towel, an empty water bottle, and a flashlight from the crash site. The children also stayed by a nearby river for a water source, according to their rescuers. They hid in tree trunks to protect themselves from snakes and insects, and they built a makeshift shelter from the camping gear. Leslie fed the baby formula she took from the crash site and water once the formula ran out, her grandfather said. The other siblings survived on berries and seeds they found in the jungle. It took 2 weeks for authorities to discover the plane's wreckage. The children and adults were traveling from Araraquara in Amazon's province to San Jose del Guaviare in southeastern Colombia when the plane malfunctioned and crashed. Members of the search team found half-eaten fruit, small footprints, a baby bottle, and a tiny pair of shoes that alerted them to the possibility that the children were still alive. Rescuers arrived as the situation was getting dire for the children. The day they were found, Leslie was very tired and couldn't walk anymore, her grandfather said. The siblings were sitting in one place and Leslie was holding the baby between her legs when they were discovered. The children, the eldest girl was carrying the little girl and holding the second eldest girl's hands. They ran to hug me, Nicholas Ordonez, a member of the Indigenous Guard, told reporters in Spanish. I received the little girl in my arms, and Leslie said, "I'm hungry." The children are now slowly regaining their strength at a military hospital. They've been playing with each other, reading and drawing pictures, the hospital director said. One picture thanking the rescuers features the words Siempre Bendecida, which means always blessed. So, this story is absolutely wild. This is an incredible story. And hey, a lot of things that we share on this show are not necessarily good news, okay? They're reality, but they're not necessarily good news. And so from time to time, if we find a story of incredible bravery, of miraculous survival, of people who just overcome, I like to share it on the show with you. And this story fits that bill 1,000% right. These kids are in an airplane. The airplane crashes in the Amazon jungle of Colombia. Their mother dies tragically right in front of them. And then they're all alone for 40 days. A 12 or 13-year-old and her younger siblings, one of whom is not even a year old yet. And they survive. They have the resourcefulness, the tenacity, the willpower to survive in the Amazon jungle on their own for 40 days. They had the sense to stay near a water source. They found berries and roots to eat. Leslie, the eldest, took care of the baby and fed her formula and then had the sense to feed her water and keep her hydrated after that. It's incredible. It's a phenomenal story. Those kids are an absolute inspiration. And I'm so glad that they're okay. I hate that they lost their mother and the rest of those on the plane, but thank God that they're okay. What a story of good news. And I gotta say, if I was 12 or 13 years old, I probably would not have made it okay. I wouldn't have had the knowledge. I wouldn't have been able to keep my head. I wouldn't have been able to care for those around me like the way that this young Leslie did. She's an absolute warrior. She might deserve a Nobel Prize, okay? I don't know all the categories, but can we find one for this young lady? Thank God they're okay. And I share this in the paranormal news segment of the show because I find it to be absolutely unexplainable and incredible and difficult to believe these kids could even manage to survive for 40 days on their own after a plane crash in the Amazon jungle. But I'm glad they did. I'm so glad they did. From the Amazon jungle, we go to Congress for our next story. And that's probably the worst transition of the show so far. From the Amazon jungle, we go to Congress, where there was a historic UFO hearing this past week. A hearing in which 3 different witnesses came before Congress under oath. Former military intelligence personnel, including one whistleblower, David Grush. And claims were made that the U.S. government is aware of extraterrestrial life and that UFOs have not only crashed here on Earth, but that we are in possession, the American government is in possession of those crafts and has been trying to reverse engineer the technology. The claims were made that we have alien bodies, that Congress and the American people have been lied to, and that those who have tried to get the truth out have been persecuted and even threatened and possibly harmed. And look, on the one hand, this hearing was what the last hearing was, and what everything else in the UFO world turns out to be. A bunch of people claiming that they have knowledge of these things, but not being able to offer any actual evidence other than their word. And a lot of it comes because information is classified. They can't talk about it unless they're in a classified setting, and I get that. But on the other hand, this was a little bit different too, in the sense that though this information is not new, and if you keep up with UFOs and UAPs, none of this is stuff that you haven't heard before. But this is the first time some of these things have been uttered before Congress under oath, and it's certainly news to a lot of the American people that, hey, like we said on episode 62 of the show, aliens are real, apparently. If you believe the whistleblower, if you believe the testimony of the 3 who were under oath before Congress, aliens are real, and our government knows about it, and our government is covering it up. Today, the head of AARO, which is the government organization that has been tasked by Congress to investigate such claims, the head of that organization came out and said that the whistleblower's account is salacious and untrue, and that he never worked with them, which is a little bit misleading because he didn't say he worked with them. He said that he was working in a capacity related to what they were doing before that exact organization was put together. But anyway, the whistleblower has been called a liar. The Department of Defense, Pentagon, NASA, and the President are all silent on the matter. And it's certainly very interesting. It's certainly very interesting. We didn't necessarily learn anything new, but I think that the hearing did move the football forward a little bit because it increases the skepticism of the American people. It brings us out of the shadows and brings us issues to the forefront. You can talk about UFOs now without being called a conspiracy theorist or crazy. It's just like a normal thing. Most people believe that there probably is some other life out there. We've seen the videos of these UFOs. And like we said on the show last time, the possibility that this is some type of military vehicle from our military or another military on the earth is still certainly possible. We don't know. But if you believe those who testified, there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And I gotta say, I really did enjoy the fact that this hearing was bipartisan. It featured Democrats and Republicans working together to get toward the truth. I guess that's still something that's possible in America in 2023. And they actually came to this hearing. The ones that were there for this hearing came, our politicians, with good questions. They seemed interested. They seemed informed. They seemed to actually care. And so in that regard, it was a lot more worthwhile than the hearings of the past. And I know there were supposed to be at least 6 people who were testifying under oath. Only half of them showed up, which may lend credence to the fact that it is something that is very risky to your career or reputation or even well-being to do, to testify and an open setting and public setting before Congress under oath about these things. Did you watch the hearing? What did you think about it? Did we learn anything new? Were you surprised by the claims made? Did you find the witnesses credible? Or is this a whole lot of nothing? Did we move the football forward on the field, or are we in the same place we've always been? Will we ever have full disclosure? I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to read them on the air. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. Let me know what you think. From aliens to aliens we go for our next story. Body cam recording catches cops investigating potential UFO crash. Hey, if those 9-foot beings come back, don't call us, all right? And I promise the paranormal segment of our show is not only devoted to aliens from here on out, but there's a lot of alien stuff in the news right now. And this article is certainly interesting. I digress. The motto of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is partners with the community, unless you're looking for aliens. Just before midnight on April 30th, the American Meteor Society received 21 reports of a fireball streaking across the southwest from a late-night cyclist in northeastern Utah to illuminating video from a Reno doorbell camera. But where did it land? CBS affiliate KLAS obtained the recording of a 911 call a Las Vegas family made to report a crashed flying saucer in their Northwest Valley backyard. I swear to God, this is not a joke. This is actually... We're terrified, a male caller tells a dispatcher on the recording, going on to describe the vehicle's 2 occupants. 2 subjects, 10 to 11 feet tall, green, tan-colored skin, neon eyes, naked, the dispatcher's notes from the call read. After several of the man's family members corroborated his account, 2 police officers were sent to the scene. I'm so nervous right now, one of the cops says in the footage obtained by KLAS. I have butterflies, bro. Saw a shooting star, and now these people say there's aliens in their backyard. After the police arrive at the home, they can be seen talking to witnesses, none of whom seem to be under the influence of anything, KLAS reported. What did you see? One officer asks. It was like a big creature, a witness replies. A big creature? The officer continues. Yeah, more than 10 feet tall, the witness answers. Body cam video shows one officer entering the backyard to investigate, but it is partly blacked out due to privacy laws. You guys seem legit scared, so I don't blame you, an officer tells one of the witnesses before asking a passenger in a passing car. This might sound really dumb, but did you guys see anything fall out of the sky? I would normally discount it too as probably not real, but however, seeing as one of my partners said they saw it, that's the reason I'm investigating further. While sources told KLAS that it is likely that something crashed into the yard, exactly what made the circular imprints that can be seen in this drone photo is unknown. The family said officials returned to the home to investigate for several days, but KLAS reports LVMPD has since closed the case, adding that prank calls in Nevada have serious consequences. Perhaps that is why, when leaving the scene of this potential first contact situation, one of the responding officers can be heard telling the family, "Hey, if those 9-foot beings come back, don't call us, all right? If you need a partner for that, try Gillian Anderson." So, allegedly, there was a UFO crash in Nevada, and an entire family saw creatures who were green or tan, naked, and 10 feet tall. And I just don't have an explanation for it. I don't know what to make of that. Even after just talking about the UFO hearings and how credible the whistleblower and witnesses were, and we've all seen the videos now from the Navy and Air Force, and the galaxy is ever expanding, it is so large, I don't have an explanation for a 10-foot tall, green or tan, naked creature in somebody's backyard. I know that I would have my pistol on me. And I know that I would be ready. I mean, hey, they might be peaceful. Maybe I'm just making some pancakes for them. But you never know. And I would be creeped out. And I would be terrified, as the family appeared to be, and the officers who responded to the scene appeared to be as well. What in the world happened in 'There allegedly was a shooting star or some type of meteor 20 plus people saw it, and one family experienced something that is perhaps otherworldly. I don't know. From Nevada to the world of conspiracy, we go for our last story, the truth about Marilyn Monroe's mysterious death. Marilyn Monroe shot to stardom in the 1950s as a curvaceous comedic vixen loved by men and women alike. She grew from pinup girl to leading star and eventually into a cultural icon. Even today, she remains the embodiment of femininity. Images of her grace everything from t-shirts and bedding to Andy Warhol's famous silkscreen prints. But she is fixed in our cultural consciousness as forever young, blonde, and beautiful because she never got the opportunity to age gracefully. At just 36 years old, Monroe was found dead in her home in Brentwood, California. Although it was officially ruled a suicide, suspicious circumstances surrounding her death sparked a string of conspiracies, positing there may have been more to it than meets the eye. Rumors began to swirl that the real cause of her death had been covered up by nefarious forces in the upper echelons of government. Her fame continues well after her death, but she's remembered not only as a talented beauty gone too soon. Her legacy is also tainted with theories of crime, cover-up, and collusion that may never be put to rest. Marilyn Monroe was an invention. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen in Los Angeles on June 1, 1926, per biography. She never knew her father, so she went by Norma Jean Baker, taking her mother's last name. Gladys Baker suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and was incapable of caring for her daughter. Monroe was raised in and out of foster homes where she suffered violence and sexual abuse. To escape, she got married at 16 to a man named Jimmy Doherty. While he served as a merchant marine in the South Pacific during World War II, Monroe did her part for the war effort by working at a munitions factory in Van Nuys. In June 1945, she caught the eye of David Conover, an Army photographer who had been sent by Army's 1st Motion Picture Unit to take pictures of the factory girls. With her curvy figure and pretty face, Conover recognized her potential. In January 1945, Monroe quit her factory job and began modeling as a pinup girl for Conover. That August, she signed a contract with Blue Book Model Agency. By the time Doherty returned in 1946, she appeared on 33 magazine covers per Vintage News. Her husband disapproved of her career, and they divorced that September. But by then, she had set her sights to grander things. She signed her first acting contract, dyed her hair, changed her name, and moved to Hollywood. By the 1960s, Monroe had won over America's hearts in films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The 7-Year Itch. Even the public release of nude photos she had taken as a financially struggling actress in 1949 only boosted her sympathy with both men and women alike, per author Michelle Vogel. Despite personal struggles, Monroe's success at the box office seemed limitless until the morning of Sunday, August 5, 1962. On the evening of Saturday, August 4th, Monroe called her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, complaining she couldn't sleep. She also phoned Peter Lawford, who was worried she sounded depressed and was slurring her words. He invited her to dinner with him and his wife, Pat, but she claimed she was too tired. She then told him, "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to Jack," meaning President John F. Kennedy, "and say goodbye to yourself, because you're a nice guy." When the housekeeper Eunice Murray awoke around 3 a.m., Monroe's bedroom light was still on, but the door was locked. When she knocked and received no answer, Murray phoned Dr. Greenson. Per the Los Angeles Times, Dr. Greenson arrived around 3:30 and used a fire poker to smash the window and enter the room. Monroe was lying face down in bed, nude, and clutching the telephone receiver, with an empty bottle of Nembutal laying next to her. Marilyn Monroe's autopsy certainly raised some questions. Monroe's body was sent to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office for examination. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Theodore Curfey, did not perform the autopsy. Instead, it was performed by Thomas Noguchi, a junior medical examiner. According to Noguchi, you start from the assumption that everybody you examine might be a murder victim. He found no needle marks to indicate she had been injected against her will. The only trauma noted was a slight ecchyomotic area on the left hip and left side of her lower back. A toxicology report was performed, but only on her blood and liver, not any other organs. The report showed clear signs of overdose. 8 milligrams per cent of chloral hydrate and 13 milligrams per cent of Nembutal, both fatal amounts. Nevertheless, skeptics would seize on this oversight as evidence of a cover-up. Some also found it suspicious there were no pills or evidence of Nembutal's signature yellow dye in her stomach. but that was not particularly unusual for a habitual drug taker. Pills taken on an empty stomach would have been absorbed directly into her intestine, leaving few traces behind. Ultimately, Noguchi felt there was nothing to indicate foul play. On August 17th, the coroner's office released their official statement saying Monroe's death was caused by a self-administered overdose of sedative drugs and that the mode of death is probably suicide. Marilyn Monroe had a long history of depression. At first, suicide did not seem suspicious. It was well known that Marilyn Monroe suffered from depression and substance abuse problems. When he first met Monroe, her future husband Arthur Miller told her, "You're the saddest girl I've ever met." Her drug and alcohol abuse was exacerbated by her chronic insomnia. The Nembutol on which she had overdosed had been prescribed by her psychiatrist, Dr. Hyman Engelberg, to help her sleep. She had also been undergoing a controversial analysis method called adoption therapy with Dr. Ralph Greenson for the past 2 years. Monroe had even previously overdosed on prescription pills. Per Anthony Summers, author of Goddess, The Secret Lives of Marilyn Monroe, in early 1962, Henry Weinstein, the producer of Something's Gotta Give, called Monroe one morning after she failed to show up for work. When she answered, she was confused and slurring her words. Weinstein went to her house and found her in a barbiturate coma. Doctors arrived in time to pump her stomach, but the incident raised doubts about Monroe's ability to complete the film. Marilyn Monroe and playwright Arthur Miller met in 1950, but they were seeing other people. They reconnected in 1955 and began a romantic relationship. Monroe converted to Judaism to marry him in a small ceremony on June 29, 1956. Monroe was infatuated with Miller, writing, "I am so concerned about protecting Arthur. I love him, and he is the only human being that I could love not only as a man to which I'm attracted to, practically out of my senses about, but he is the only person that I trust as much as myself." The honeymoon period ended when they moved to London in 1957. Monroe discovered a diary entry in which Miller wrote that he was disappointed in her and sometimes embarrassed by her in front of his friends. She was crushed. They returned to America, buying a house in Roxbury, Connecticut, but, clearly unhappy, Monroe had an affair with her Let's Make Love co-star in 1960. Despite that, Miller pressured Monroe to star in the film adaptation of his story, The Misfits. Per Rare, she was reluctant to accept the role. She hated the sexism she experienced on set and resented that the role was based on her life. While the press was busy promoting The Misfits, the couple divorced. It would be the last film that Monroe would complete. Exhausted and depressed, Monroe committed herself to Payne Whitney's psychiatric ward following her separation from Miller. She immediately regretted the decision. Upon arrival, her clothes and belongings were taken from her. She was forced to take a bath and put on a hospital gown. A doctor performed a full-body examination over Monroe's protest that she had just received one less than 30 days earlier. Monroe recounted her traumatic experience in a letter to Dr. Greenson. "I picked up a lightweight chair and slammed it against the glass intentionally. I went over with the glass concealed in my hand and sat quietly on the bed. I said to them, if you're going to treat me like a nut, I'll act like a nut. I indicated if they didn't let me out, I would harm myself." 4 staff members forcibly carried Monroe to the 7th floor, where she was forced to take another bath. Monroe was kept in a padded cell in a locked psychiatric ward for 3 days. There was no empathy at Payne Whitney. The inhumanity there I found archaic. They asked me why I wasn't happy there. I answered, well, I'd have to be nuts if I liked it here. Dr. Chris told me I was a very, very sick girl and had been a very, very sick girl for many years. Over the course of her career, Monroe's films had grossed $200 million per the Los Angeles Times. But on her last film shoot, her director decided her star power wasn't worth putting up with her chronic tardiness, absenteeism, and overall difficult behavior. Monroe began shooting Something's Gotta Give in early 1962. She was derided by her coworkers as willfully disruptive through her scenes in a depressed and drug-induced state. That June, she was fired for spectacular absenteeism and sued by Fox for $750,000 for willful violation of contract. However, her co-star Dean Martin threatened to quit unless she was brought back, saying, "I have the greatest respect for Miss Lee Remick and her talent, and all the other actresses who were considered for the role, but I signed to do this picture with Marilyn Monroe, and I will do it with no one else." She was rehired a few months later. Not everyone was pleased about her return. The film's screenwriter Walter Bernstein called her a movie star who's getting her way and who doesn't give a bleep about anyone else. Filming was set to begin again in October, but that would never happen. Monroe was found dead in August. A communist conspiracy. There were no real conspiracies surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death until 1964, when Frank A. Capel published The Strange Death of Marilyn Monroe. The short book claimed Monroe had been murdered by communists on the orders of then Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Capel believed Monroe and Robert Kennedy had been lovers, but the relationship soured when Kennedy refused to leave his wife. Furious, Monroe threatened to go public with the relationship. Rather than risk ruining his shot at the presidency, Kennedy supposedly dispatched a cabal of communists to eliminate Monroe and cover up the murder. A staunch anti-communist, Capel claimed, when a person has become a liability or is getting out of hand, the Communist Party has no compunction in ordering his or her liquidation. Marilyn was deeply involved with left-wingers and identified communists, and her death has many suspicious aspects to it. The National Archives also reveal Monroe's doctor, Hyman Engelberg, admitted to being a member of the Communist Party, but Monroe's most public association with communism was her husband, Arthur Miller. Per biography, the left-leaning playwright had been summoned to D.C. in 1956 to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee about party-affiliated meetings he had attended in the 1940s. Despite advice against it, Monroe publicly stood by Miller. Though he was cited for contempt, Monroe's popularity saved Miller from being blacklisted, as many of his peers had been. Monroe was said to have had relationships with both President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Tongues began wagging after Monroe sang her now-famous sultry rendition of Happy Birthday to the President at a Democratic fundraiser on May 19, 1962. JFK responded by saying, "I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way." While their relationship was salacious, it was nothing more than a casual fling. More troubling was Monroe's alleged affair with Robert Kennedy. Monroe was led to believe his intentions were serious and he would leave his wife for her via the National Archives. Peter Lawford, the last person to speak to Monroe, was the Kennedys' brother-in-law. She possibly feared Lawford, writing about being afraid he might harm me, poison me, etc., per Vanity Fair. Some speculated that Robert Kennedy had been at Lawford's house in Los Angeles the night she died. In his 1985 book, Anthony Summers presented the theory that RFK and Lawford were responsible for plying Monroe with drugs to render her incapable of exposing the affair. On the night of August 4th, she accidentally died of an overdose in an ambulance. To avoid implication, RFK wanted to get out of Los Angeles before news of her death broke. Lawford returned the body to her home and orchestrated a cover-up to make the overdose look like a suicide. By the 1970s, the rumor mill was in full swing. Claims began surfacing that Monroe had been murdered by the Kennedy loyalists in the CIA. Allegedly, she had been privy to the confidential information about a secret CIA plot to kill Fidel Castro. After being spurned by Robert Kennedy, Monroe planned to release the information per the Chicago Tribune. To hide the scandal, the CIA injected Monroe with barbiturates and staged the death to look like a suicide. Jack Clemens, the homicide investigator who was first on the scene of Monroe's death, was adamant that she was murdered by needle injection by someone she knew and probably trusted. This was the cover-up crime of a century, a matter of the Los Angeles Police Department and other officials here protecting a famous political family of the East who had good reasons to shut Monroe's mouth. In its 1973 book, Marilyn, a novel biography, Norman Mailer raised questions over the integrity of the investigation, especially the autopsy. The word was out to keep this thing a suicide, not to make it a murder. If you're the coroner and you feel the official mood is to find evidence of a suicide, you wouldn't want to come in with a murder, he wrote. In August 1982, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office reopened the investigation into Monroe's death in light of new allegations. The deputy coroner, Lionel Grandison, came forward claiming he had been coerced into signing the death certificate. Grandison claimed the whole thing was organized to hide the truth. An original autopsy file vanished. A scrawled note that Marilyn Monroe wrote, and which did not speak of suicide, also vanished, and so did the first police report. I was told to sign the official report or I'd find myself in a position I couldn't get out of. Private Detective Milo Spergilio also claimed Monroe's diary had gone missing after her death. He believed the diary held damning information about the Kennedys, including information about the CIA's plot to kill Castro and the Kennedys' involvement with the Mafia per the CIA. He was confident not only that it still existed, but that it may tell us who killed Marilyn Monroe. He even offered $10,000 to anyone who could turn up the missing diary. However, the diary never appeared and the inquest failed to turn up any viable information. Monroe's official cause of death remained a suicide. A final tragic explanation is Marilyn Monroe's death was simply an accidental overdose. Monroe's career was on the upswing and she had only recently purchased the Brentwood home. There was also no suicide note, although according to Dr. Robert Littman, the psychiatrist who headed the psychiatric investigative team, suicide notes are left by fewer than 40% of people via the Los Angeles Times. Monroe's close friend Pat Newcomb insisted the death was accidental, saying, Marilyn was in perfect physical condition and was feeling great, and they had made plans to go to the movies the following day. Monroe had also made plans to meet with her lawyer, Milton Rudin, who claimed she appeared to be happy. According to the psychiatric investigative team's report on Monroe's death, she had been seeking psychiatric treatment, with one of the main goals being to reduce her drug intake. She had been partially successful and was reported to be following doctors' orders in her use of drugs. They also reported, on more than one occasion she had made a suicide attempt using sedative drugs. On those occasions she had called for help and had been rescued. It is our opinion that some pattern was repeated on the evening of August 4th, except for the rescue. While Littman declared the case a probable suicide, it is possible that on this occasion she wanted rescue but was unable to call for help. So, this is one that I have always found to be interesting, because there are so many layers to the mysterious death of Marilyn Monroe. On the one hand, she had a history of depression and of drug use, and there are a lot of questions about what drugs she was prescribed and what she was taking and when, and about her psychiatrist. On the other hand, she also had a connection in an intimate way to both JFK and RFK. And in what appears to be corroborated and well-documented instances, her relationship with Robert Kennedy was a lot more serious in her mind than it was in his. And this was something that was very difficult for her, and that she was having a hard time making sense of. So while it is very likely and even probable that she either committed suicide or was taking an assortment of drugs not with the intent to die, but that tragically had that result, it's also certainly fathomable to me that she attempted to force the hand of the President of the United States' brother, the sitting Attorney General, a family that does not come without their own share of scandal and cover-ups. And as a result of her trying to force his hand, she wound up dead. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Yeah, I don't know. Marilyn Monroe's death is certainly a mystery. I don't think this is a open and closed case. I don't think it's as simple as she had these drugs in her system and she was found with a pill bottle there. Where were the pills? What's up with the odd circumstances surrounding her death? There's even questions about who arrived at her house and when, where they found her, the role of her psychiatrist, who she was attempting to call on the phone or who she had been on the phone with, the fact that she was found the way that she was. There's certainly a lot of questions that have still remained unanswered to this day. And if I had to venture a guess, this is one of the rare circumstances where I will put more chips in the center of the table on the fact that something else was going on and something else happened here than just the simplest explanation of an accidental or intentional overdose. There's too many odd circumstances. There's too many questions. There's too many possible implications for information getting out that shouldn't have, or that would do harm to those who had a lot of power and influence. And whether it was the Kennedys or those close to the Kennedys or the CIA or communists or whatever you want to say, I think that it is possible that Marilyn Monroe's death was not of her own choosing or her own tragic mistake. And some people blame her psychiatrist. Some people blame the one that applied her with pills, almost in the sense of how the one doctor was blamed for Michael Jackson dying. He was being given propofol every night to go to sleep. Some people draw a correlation that the doctor that prescribed her this stuff was doing so not in her best interest. The truth is, we don't know what happened for sure. Officially, it was a suicide or accidental overdose. But I gotta be honest, I still have questions. What do you think, my tools, my people, my babies? What happened to Marilyn Monroe? Is it a mystery at all? Is her death truly a mystery? Or do we know? Did she just have an accidental overdose? Was it the suicide of a very troubled and depressed starlet? Or was it something more sinister? What do you believe about this case? What do you believe about this mystery? I want your feedback. I want to hear from you. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. And let me know what you think. For me, the jury's still out. For me, it truly is a mystery. And I have questions. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 63. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, rank the top 10 quarterbacks for the upcoming NFL season, and learn together about the giant turtle of Churubusco, Indiana. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Meemaw, we made it!
We sure did.